Coimbatore, and all learned participants from different parts of India and especially from the state of Tamil Nadu and others. It's really something very interesting to discuss with all of us. It's mostly a discussion time between all of us to think, learn and learn how to interpret or read literary texts, literary productions with the available parameters, contexts, with variant locations and interpretative autonomy. These days when we talk about the interpretation of texts, largely our own system, the system through which we have produced stuff. Like suppose, no, when we were students, the students of the participants were students, syllabus in the colleges and universities were largely dominated by the Eurocentric model or America-centric model. So the most of the theoretical foundations of most of the participants are heavily dependent on the critical idioms, critical receptions, critical theories that we received through our syllabus, through our production system, that is courses taught at the graduation, post-graduation, MPhil, PhD, and other levels. But when you think of the global parameters changing for 75th year of Indian independence that we celebrated, can't we think that we have our own model to look at the literary productions written, born, brought up in India, and of course interpreted to the Indian context? And remember, most of us present here have more than one generation of English-speaking time in our life. We are not always the first-time language learner as English learner, or first time that we come in terms with the idioms of the Indian tradition or Indian ways of looking at it. Had it been 50, 60 years ago, our critical idiom was not that sound to interpret Indian texts written in India, translated in India, and transmitted in India. Gone are the days when we cannot have parameters and contexts, only heavy with the Western parameters, to look at the writings by the Indians or diasporic Indians, the Indians in diaspora, part of our syllabus, UG, PG, and taking up research topic for PhD or MPhil level. My humble submission in this afternoon is that with Alur Jankiram, C.T. Narasimha, falling back to Nissim Ezekiel and the golden tradition of Sangam literature and language tradition of Tamil Nadu, where we are now actually interacting in the platform in Coimbatore. We have had the system of knowledge that is our own. It's not that we are largely dependent on the Western Gharana tradition of knowledge system to introduce and to appreciate the literary productions by the Indians. Now, let me give you a couple of examples to justify my claim. Suppose the emergence and growth and development of the British literature, literary texts, whenever we think of, we always refer to the texts which were written by the British or the Americans. At the same time, we had the texts, critical texts, in support of those literary traditions. That means when we were students or the participants were students in the colleges and universities in India, there was a course on literature by the British, mostly it was British, language mostly by the British courses, and the criticism, think of Shakespeare, Shakespearean criticism. And also at the same time, there was a course on British history. So in India, when English literature was introduced, they came with these three parameters as a whole. But when we introduced Indian writing in English, starting with Commonwealth literature, as C.T. Narasimha, a great man from Mysore, Dhanalok, and or Alur Jankiram from Rajasthan, Srinivasa Iyengar, little later from Andhra Pradesh, and many others in 1960s and early part of 1970s. Indian writing in English came as under the baggage of the Commonwealth literature. What is interesting is that we started learning Indian writing in English, and we had very little to fall back on the criticism on Indian productions. That means on Indian writing in English. In most of the universities, if you look into the early part of the introduction to Indian writing in English, it came in isolation. That means there was no course on Indian history or political history of India, social history of India, sociology of India, and a course of literary productions supported by a course on the criticism on Indian writing in English. So actually, when we conceived that the English literature should be translated, transmitted within the system of literary framework of the graduation, undergraduate or postgrad level in the Indian universities, it was mostly monolithic. So the participants who are the parts of boards of studies in different colleges, autonomous colleges, universities, it's my humble submission in this afternoon to look back what we have done to our introduction to Indian writing in English in Indian universities. Let me give you another example. If I ask this question open to all my dear friends, colleagues, and participants who are actually here, if I ask you about the history, political history of the northeastern part of India, I know the answer will be very dim. Some, many, maybe I think almost nil. Nobody will say that I have that traditional knowledge. That means I was taught in the school, college, or the university about the northeastern part of India, their writing process, and the history of that. My point is that when we want to really have a full-fledged research on something on Indian in a country like India, so multicultural, so many languages take vernaculars. If I say India has veins and arteries, I say the vernaculars are the veins and arteries of India, isn't it? So when we look at a particular text written by an Indian, that particular geographical dimensions, cultural milieu, the political ideology of the place, sociological engagements, which are paramount in intersecting or intervening the critical discourse or building up a critical discourse on that particular person from where he or she is. Here we have almost a pan-Indian audience. Knowing India is always a challenge. And when we are in the process of board of studies to frame syllabus for the students, there should be some kind of holistic representation of syllabus. writing from other states, writing from other backgrounds, writing from other political, sociological contexts to make a comprehensive Indian writing in English. It's not that. It's a kind of homogenic kind of atmosphere. It is an umbrella. And in the umbrella, there's a beautiful mosaic of cultures. My humble submission to relearn and learn, to rethink and rethink the approaches towards framing the syllabus, towards intervening into the map making of literary map making of India. It's really a challenge, a very scholarly process. When we face that tasks, we keep in mind that we present before our students a wide spectrum of Indian writing in English, not only coming from different corners of India, but also from different backgrounds of India. And of course, the Indian diaspora settled in different countries, first generation, second generation, and third generation. So the point I began with again, whenever we are introducing a course on Indian writing in English, we should have some parameters on the political, sociological, and the kind of cultural, holistic map making of India, and contextualizing the writers, taking from different parts of India and making them really connected with the land and the people, so that India in true colors come before us. The scholarship now is very dynamic. We cannot just say that scholarship is traditional. What is traditional is respected. At the same time, we will have to evolve a culture to embrace a holistic education for the maturity of scholarships. When we think of a literature for the sake of literature, it has one dimension of truth. There are other dimensions of truth that we are a part of a knowledge society. We can be a part of a social scientist category. We should not only think as a writer or a critic bounded by certain walls of truth. Our worlds will merge into door and disciplines will be multidisciplinary. As we all know, the current system that we are approaching or already have approached, the multidisciplinary approach to literary studies. We have enormous faith on aesthetics for the sake of aesthetics. At the same time, we cannot forget the sociological parameters, the political parameters, the literary parameters, the geographical dimensions, and other aspects which are very important for the map making of Indian writing in English. My second take on this is that how long shall we be prefixing the word Indian before writing in English? Do we ever ask this question if someone writes in English from England? Do we call them English writing? And how long shall we be falling in the trap of post colonial? And why do we need to carry on the word colonial? And we will be prefixing post, and that. With the 75 years of Indian independence, We are a competent body of critics. We have a competent body of literary productions which can define its own course and journey. Therefore, in many universities, board of studies, course designers, we fall in a trap, just one to replace with another. But it is time to fall back on our own knowledge system and frame our own definite vision, what we really want at the undergraduate, postgraduate, and at the research departments in different colleges and universities in India. Let me now introduce a few subjects or topics which I think all of you will enjoy relating to what I have said in last 10-15 minutes of time. Let me take up one particular issue. Suppose it is the issue is suppose Dalit feminism. If you, I think many of us are aware of Karukku or Shangati because Bhama is an important map maker of Indian writing today. And most of the powerful writing of Bhama come to English and other vernaculars through the modes of translation. I personally consider translation as the most effective and powerful tool to read India because I am talking to all coming from different parts of India through a language that is negotiable, isn't it? Therefore, if you read some of the important interviews by Bhama, at the same time, there is an important fiery poetess, writer from Bengal, Kullani Thakur Chadal. Their writings, because today is Women's Day, we are celebrating very powerful women at our home front and the front, of course, everywhere, every sphere we meet with. We respect, my homage to all. Now, Kullani Thakur Chadal is also a powerful writer, and now her translations are also available in English. What I want to focus on these two important writers about they write about their gender discrimination, their caste discrimination, and their discrimination on the basis of their background. Now, India and some of the African countries are very unique in the world. Let me tell you very frank. We cannot actually demarcate these important countries, some countries in Africa and India, as one holistic or one general term. For example, feminism. But if we look into from the model and perspective of intersectionality, it is an important sociological documentation to look at every Indian through their locale, through their cultural mapping, through their gender, and of course, their lineage, historicity, and all. Now, when we just think about Bhama or Kullani Thakur, both the interviews are available online. You can search Bhama and then write my name. There will be interviews coming up with Bhama, and there will be interviews coming out with Kullani Thakur. And you will get two at least interviews by each of them. I asked 10 years ago, the question was very flat. Why do you call yourself a Dalit feminist? But in recent time, 3-4 years ago, the interviews conducted with Bhama and Kullani Thakur, I had to ask them, do you prefer the term Dalit feminism or Dalit womanism. But strange, this is a document easily available in public shared knowledge because both are published from a very reputed journal in Australia. You just Google, you will get it. They all preferred the term Dalit womanism over Dalit feminism. Now, womanism is something which includes many other dimensions, which possibly a monolingual country cannot think of. By monolingual country, I mean the tradition of the West cannot interpret that bunch of literary productions. For that, we need an Indian drishti, Indian ways of knowledge to fathom the unfathomable depth and the tradition and the history of this particular topic. Now, another important facet that comes into being is the intersectionality. We are cultural scientists, as I have already said, because in foreign countries, there is nothing called the English department. We have departments like social inquiry or humanities. And many of our students, budding scholars, will have to get scholarships, funding, projects, and also have to survive in colleges and universities in India and beyond, and in the world map through these newly tagged newly formed departments where English is one of the subjects out of the many subjects covered under an umbrella term to look at the critical discourse written in the language called English. Now, I gave this example particularly to map that feminism leading to womanism is a matter of choice on the basis of cultural context. Here on screen, you can easily see here in this particular scene, you can see there is a text, and in this particular text, you need a different cultural approach to look at the text. This is a text written by Jatin Bala. And who is Jatin Bala? He came to Bengal immediately after Indian independence through partition, and he was from a refugee, and he had to spend his life in different refugee camps. I know here all of us present, and I think many of us, we don't have exposure to a refugee camp, or even by museum we have never visited to refugee camps within India. But we know the camps of associated with Hitler. But this is also our own history. And through these corridors of history, we have come to a very powerful India. And really, one of the important documents to look at this particular phase of history. I know many of us are not, many of us present here are not aware of this part of partition, where like people like Jyotin Bala had to cross the border because of political unrest in Bangladesh and had to arrive at West Bengal. And Jyotin Bala was born in 1949 in Jessore, and there was a communal tension everywhere. He lost his mother when he was a little over a year old, and his father died when he was barely 4. He was brought up by his eldest brother, and he was older than him by 25 years. Jyotin Bala, in this very particular autobiography, I say this is not one autobiography. This is the cultural documentation of a period of a large period of time in a very conflict zone, like the border zone, coming from that part of Bengal and entering into West Bengal. And now, why did I really refer to this particular text as one of the model texts? Because I think those who are present here are totally unfamiliar with the existence of, refugee camps. This Bala had to live with refugee camps in 3 refugee camps. And there was state policy for that rehabilitation, central policy for rehabilitation, combined actually policy for that. At the same time, how can we forget the history that is also was on our card? Jatin Bala came from a Namashudra family. Namashudra is now termed as one of the Dalit communities, large Dalit communities in Bengal. And when he was in one camp, Bolagar camp, he started going to a school. In that particular school, some students who were willing to go to school, and these camps were liberal to take them to school. And he was to mix up with other people in that particular school. And this particular book, published by Sahitya Academy translation, Shikar Chheda Jibon, this is the Bengali name, A Life Uprooted, a Bengali Dalit refugee remembers. Life Uprooted, a Bengali Dalit refugee remembers. Why this book is so important in the cultural map making in India or in the state? Because we come across some very powerful texts which can give you an inroad to history, which are unfamiliar, untrodden. Similarly, this is one book which gives you a new dimension to look at who is a Bengali in the present day and how the history, present day history, was a kind of destination, and the last 75 years was a journey. Bala writes his autobiography when he retires from service. He was in refugee camps, 3 refugee camps, and look at the title, like Septic Wounds, one of the titles of this particular autobiography, big size autobiography, easily available because this is published by Sahitya Academy. And and this book gives you an inroad to the history, political history of India since early 1950s. And look at the comment by Maleshri Lal, Professor Maleshri Lal. Sri Jyotin Bala's powerful autobiography exposes the inequities of caste and class during the partition of 1947 in Bengal. A refugee child growing up in a tent, the struggle for a life of dignity is doubly hard when marked by a Dalit identity. It is an adolescent's journey seeking education, dignity, and selfhood, all which are denied because of the stigma of being low born. Confronting violence turns Bala towards activism. Facing caste abuse makes him question hierarchies. The answers are heard lessons about social organization in India of that time. And after the translation, the book enters and, and really it becomes a Dalit discourse with honesty and deep understanding. I refer to Bama, I refer to Kalyani Thakur. I introduced another dimension to look at a text written by an Indian victim of partition who spent his childhood in 3 different refugee camps. When he becomes, no, he can control the language. Later stage in life, he goes back and writes his own autobiography. Now, my question here is, how can a literary, critical literary idiom dominated by the Eurocentric model really look into the discourse of this particular text? I tell you, this will be thrice removed from truth if it is not properly appreciated or in a critique by an Indian Gharana produced critic. That means India trained eyes need a kind of need a kind of dimension to look into the text and really come out with appropriate meaning. History of one nation can be read by anyone in the world. But of course, when someone is a victim, his own first-hand experiences, written not by one particular rhythm of Bangla, written with a very specific rhythm of Bangla, transmitted into English, translated into English. Now it has a power to travel in different languages within India as vernaculars, as in different languages, European languages, and become a, an important cultural tool to know about India, to know about a rehabilitation policy of the state and its effects, and how it was received, and how the cultural mapping of a particular time zone of India has been truthfully portrayed through this autobiography. I know the question will come, then how powerful the autobiography can be. It is unequivocal, and the answer is definite. Autobiographies are important tools to read history. Without autobiographies, it's very difficult to get back to the original happenings of the world, because histories are always corridors of uncertainty. Who writes, for whom, and who really publishes? All of the questions we all know. How can we forget another very powerful autobiography written by a very powerful uh, person, but the country is different, from South Africa, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. Now, I give very extremely, all prominent tools to be attached with autobiographies, because Long Walk to Freedom is a must-read book to know about the movement in Africa, apartheid movement in Africa. Similarly, A Life Uprooted, a Bengali Dalit refugee remembers, published by Sahitya Academy, New Delhi, is an important tool to know India properly. When we think about course making in different parts of India, we need a collaborative approach. When I if I am in charge of a course making in democratic platform in Kolkata, I must take help from my colleagues and critics, writers from, of course, Tamil Nadu and different parts of India. Otherwise, my vision will never be complete. Therefore, this is another new approach to look at the text, because these texts were not even written in vernacular 40 years ago. This was written in Bengali in 15 years ago, translated into English, and it came out in English form just last year, 2023. And look at this particular screen share at Kunti. Kunti is one of the 3 transit camps, refugee transit camps, where there are 500 to 600 tents, and the camp was dirty, unkept, says Bala. You understand the naturalistic, I won't say realistic, naturalistic description of the tents, of the camps where he had to spend his time, and also look at the last paragraph here. Here, Bala worked as a child labor and was often physically abused. One day, when I fell down while carrying a bundle of straw on my head, I resolved would study and get myself an education. He resolved that only through education one day I can come out of this refugee camp. I can get something in my life. Truly, later on we come to know that he, later stage he completed MA also and became a government servant. Now, the history of a country is a long, strenuous history. The history of a country is a lighted discourse. Literary productions are important tools of history making. Literary productions are important tools for India in making India truth. And remember, through biographies, through autobiographies, through letters, short stories, through poems, through writings, through life narratives, there are several ways to reach the ocean of truth. And the history is always very puzzling because they are pocket dominated. I give you another example of another text. Now I switch over to northeastern part of India. Zorami, Zorami. Zorami in Mizo, it's a Mizo term, means flower. Zorami is a first Mizo novel in English, written in English by Malashami Jacob, Zorami. It is an epic of the geopolitical, sociological documentation of the Mizo state. If you read Zorami, I tell you, you will be a different person, because it gives you an inroad to the history, corridors of history, which are unfamiliar to you. And the text is so rich. Descriptions are charged with emotion and intensity. With these texts, what I want to sum up actually, and when we are part of Board of Studies, course designing and everything, we need to be more holistic than an academic. We need more activists than dry scholarships. Only dry scholarship will give you a surface level interface of the literary histories, productions, and the cultural mapping. Unless we become an activist by nature, our ways of research will become only surface level. The text, the new challenge that the Indians have taken care of, I think, looking into life straightforward, and they can write whatever they want to write and they are a good researchers with knowledge system acquired from the West and of course our own tradition of Indian knowledge system. We are important map makers in the world. That's why our literary texts written by the Indian diaspora abroad are hotcakes. Many are nominated for different important uh, prizes and accolades, recognitions. But how can we forget that the true India will emerge out of proper understanding, knowledge, and of course, amalgamation of the systems we inherit as well as we relate to the contemporary parameters. For example, I give you one more. There are so many things to talk in this particular topic. Suppose the dimensions of poetry. There was a lot of criticism about Indian English poetry because think of 1950s and we already have a little bit of Indian English drama, Indian English novel, Indian English essays, but poetry was one genre where Indians did not sign before 1950s. We had Nissim Ezekiel generation just came, a time to change, change the life of the Indians. And he started with a journal, very important journal, of course, Quest. We have a journal, we have poet, and the role of Sahitya Academy. We may subscribe to the views of Nehru or may not, but his wonderful creations of one of the creations is, of course, the Sahitya Academy. And Sahitya Academy is actually very important map maker of India through literary and language productions. Now, again, coming back to 1950s, that criticism that we had, we can write prose, but we cannot write poetry in English with aesthetic parameters. Possibly, we were a little bit of imitative by nature. What is interesting is that after 75 years of Indian independence, look at the last 10 years, 60th year of Indian independence to 75th year of Indian independence. These 15 years, 2010, 2008, 9 onwards, many important journals in the world are guest edited, where poetry is the focus by the Indian poets, by the Indian scholars who have the heart of poetry and who are important critics on Indian English poetry and world poetry. Indian poetry has entered into the world scenario like a storm, and many Indian poetry can give the kind of feel what the bilingual English poets can never give that feel. Because I am very fortunate. I am born and brought up in India. I have myths, I have legends, I have histories to share with. I have the mosaic of culture to share with all of us. How can a monolingual country, how can a monocultural tradition can give birth to a writer as the Indians can ever do? Our multiculturalism, our multilingualism, our epics, our mythological tradition, our history, our heritage are our bonus. And that's why Indian writing in English is the most emphatically powerful tool in the contemporary world parameter. You and I are important contributors in the world map making, world literary map making. And remember, our heritage of scholarship in vernacular, also in English, also by English, I mean written in English or translated in English, is an important, powerful tool at looking at Indian writing in English. Indian writing in English, I mean Indian diaspora in different countries. So we not necessarily always need the Western tradition of knowledge system or the critical idioms and critical theory to implement on Indian texts, like Rama Mehta's Inside the Haveli. Inside the Haveli is about the Haveli culture of Rajasthan and what to do with a foreign scholarship on that. We need the Indian ways to look at it. And we have many important critics now in 75 years of journey in vernaculars, also in English, who can really appreciate the text properly and relate it to Indian sociology and Indian gharana of writing. The making of India makes India proud of. I really stop because it's a 1 hour talk, but it could continue to 6, 7 hours talk. But I humbly request to all Board of Studies members, university professors, college professors, to make a holistic syllabus for our next generation to building up a powerful India, India in true color and scholarship. I really will be happy to receive a few questions from your end. I know some of the thoughts are very groundbreaking, but we need more activists to let it be infectious, to let it go and enkindle the creative aroma of the Indians, which is really unique. Indian vernaculars, Indian knowledge system, Indian cultural history, Indian epics, only Indians can explore it. Thank you so much. I really expect questions from all of you.
Thank you, sir, for your knowledgeable, clear, and wonderful presentation on the topic prescribed for the day. We all enjoyed. And sir is expecting some questions from the audience. If anyone has any question, kindly put that. Audience. Audience, you can raise your hand and sir is waiting for questions. You can ask.
Participants, you can ask the questions.
Please, looking
Now,
forward.
this is the question and answer.
Please, please,
This is
please.
the question and answer session. Participants, please ask your questions if you have. Participants, this is the question and answer session. Please ask your question.
As no questions are seen, may we close the session. May I request Mr. Gautam to propose his vote of thanks at this end of.
Madam,
One question is there.
Sushila, madam, one person has raised the hand, madam. Kusham Kumari. Kusham Kumari, please ask your question. Kusham Kumari. please ask your.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Yes,
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 good afternoon.
yes, yeah,
Sir, actually, your lecture was quite interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, and moreover, like you have literally taken us into the Indian culture, ethics, and the background of, something that you called it as the holistic culture.
Mhm.
So I would just like to ask you, sir, could you refer some more books which talk about the Indian culture and what we call as the post-colonial texts?
There's so many. One, a few I explained.
Yeah, you have
Uh,
actually given so many in numbers,
uh,
and we have literally we
uh,
had
I
so
will ask the organizers to share the book details. That is the book it was screening. Huh? A couple of
yes,
books with them. I will share Pariji to if you can really share the document to the participants. There's an important book, Zurami, that I mentioned from Northeast.
yes, yes,
So I think this is time that you read literatures written from different parts of India, from different cultural contexts,
yes, sir.
and through ragging or something, maybe rigging, those texts were not written before, could not be written before. And
Yes,
now, no, with the advent of the second generations or third, fourth generations of English professors, English critics, they are taking the challenge of translating that into powerful medium called English, so that
yes,
it
sir.
can be translated into other Indian languages, other vernaculars, and also to other foreign languages. And it will be it will have a democratic shape, isn't it? So
So
unless it is translated into English, that's why we need more shoulders for translators. Whatever
yes,
text you write, very powerful vernacular texts which are important and possibly crying behind because, there are not takers as for translation, isn't it? The moment you open up the floodgate of translation, you have a new world to look at. Like the
yes,
text I mentioned, Life Uprooted. If you read
yes,
a Life Uprooted, I tell you, you order a copy, you read it, and you will be a different man and woman very soon.
yes,
Because
sir.
the histories we have not read. Histories are what people could introduce in your school and the college level. There are histories behind the selection of history, and silence is also history, isn't it? So that is very important thing to look at. Mm.
Sir, I just wanted to ask, like, we all know that we that Eurocentricity as we have this nature of that bringing a commodity in the language. So the fact is that why not that the regional languages given so much of importance? It's understood that we are with the English language as being a globalized language. But what is that? You actually it lies there that uh, we as Indians, why don't we give importance to that particular text of ours? What is the need of like translating something of the so-called post-colonial colonizers?
Yes, that's why, there are some important also, like I read translations from different parts of India, very post-colonial texts. By post-colonial here means, I'll say anti-establishment or anti-stereotype texts, isn't it? Suppose
Yes,
Indian texts which were not published before, you cannot call them post-colonial, isn't it?
yes,
Because within Indian context, there were some hierarchies, some stratifications for which they could not publish the text.
yes, sir.
Publishers were very much Brahminical in knowledge. By Brahminical, I say they actually monopolized some kind of authentic texts for publications. But
Hmm.
who says this is authentic and this is not authentic? So the conception of canon we'll have to unlearn. So what is, no, we must read all. Then only think about the term canonical. We
Yes,
only
sir.
say this is sacrosanct, this is very important text. Did you read others? If we do not read, how can we say this knowledge is very important knowledge? That's
Yes,
why
sir.
with the power of knowledge, power of vernaculars, by Indian vernaculars, I say English is, we made English as Indian vernacular.
Yeah.
We made English as Indian vernacular. So with that, we will look into a system and will frame our own system to look at India and Indian writing in English holistically.
Yes, sir.
It's not that only some text will be chosen at random, and someday in the morning I dream for a text and that text is included. It is not simple like that. It should come out with a process of surveys, long 5 months, 6 months surveys. What are the important culture mapping texts written or translated into English, which can be incorporated? That is what I had my document presentation today.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. More power to all of you. I hope all of you have the aroma of writing more in vernaculars as well as in English.
Sure, sir.
Sure, sir.
Yes.
May I request Mr. Gautam, the Department of English, to propose his vote of thanks at the end of the day's program. Now over to you, Mr. Gautam.
Once Cicero said, "Gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all the others." As we conclude this remarkable event, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each one of you for making it a resounding success. Our sincere thanks go to the organizers whose meticulous planning and dedication ensured the seamless execution of every detail. A special appreciation to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Jaydeep Sarangi, Principal, New Alipur College, West Bengal, whose insights enriched our understanding and inspired us. To the volunteers and staff who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, your dedication did not go unnoticed. Your efforts were pivotal in creating a welcoming and engaging atmosphere. Our gratitude extends to the participants and attendees without whom this gathering would lack its vibrant energy. Your enthusiasm and active participation contributed to overall success of this event. In closing, let's carry forward the knowledge gained and connections made here today. Together, we have created lasting memories, and I'm confident that the impact of this event will resonate in our endeavors. Thank you once again for being part of this memorable occasions.
Thank you all.
Mr. Gautam.
Thank you, the
sir.
department. Thank you, everyone.
Nice knowing you. Thank you, all the participants, for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
participants. Thank you, sir.